Well, thank you everyone for coming. Before we get started, I just always like to kind of get a audience poll of how many of you all in here have experienced virtual reality before? How about augmented reality? Very cool. Okay, so we have a good educated audience to get started. So we're gonna, start with a few questions that we have, and then I'm gonna open it up for questions of the audience as well. Just to get started, my name is Natascha French. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at VNTANA. At VNTANA, we create interactive holograms, so allowing people to be at multiple locations at once without the need of wearable headsets, and also help brands create 3D digital assets that can be used across multi-platforms from AR to VR and web. So I'm super excited as I have two smart, wonderful women next to me that I know well. First to my right is Marcie Jastrow. She's the SVP of Immersive Media at Technicolor, and she also is the head of the Technicolor Experience Center. So you all have her bio here, so I'm not going to go deep into her background. And then to her right is Christina who's the CEO of Metastage. So at Metastage, they really focus on volumetric video capture, and she'll dive into some use cases there. So to get started, I wanted to kind of bring them back a little bit and get a sense of if you can tell me, what was your first experience with XR?
Well, mine was, I'll never forget it, the time and place. It was 2014 Sundance New Frontiers. They had the DK1 headset, and they were showcasing the Chris Milk Beck concert experience. And, it's funny because you'll still see people do this today, where you put on the headset and then they tell you, you can turn around. And I was pretty blown away. I was on stage with Beck. I fell in love with the potential of virtual reality in that moment. Came back to Los Angeles, very curious about who was doing content for this new medium, and quickly found out that there were very few people at the time doing it. And it was that perfect point in my life. I was 30 years old. I knew just enough to get myself in trouble and not enough to know what kind of a crazy road I was about to embark upon, and decided I was going to start a company specializing in content for this new medium, and gathered my creative collaborators at the time and said, guys, if nobody's doing this, if we start doing it, we'll be an expert. And I was like, you don't like making independent films, right? Come on, it snowballed from there. We sort of, our enthusiasm for the vision of what this medium could be attracted the right types of people to our organization, and that was how I started, and that was how I started with my first company, which was VR Playhouse. And now I'm at a new company, Metastage, so we can get into that later.
Perfect.
Similar conversation, although I was on my way to Sundance, and a woman who I've known for quite a long time, Shannon Gaines, I happened to be in the middle seat, and she was sitting next to me, and we hadn't seen each other in a while. And she's like, I'm so excited, because she had come from film. I'm a new frontier. And as a person coming from film, when you make it in Sundance, it's a big deal. Although this was with cardboard and a phone. And so she's like, look what I'm in for. And I put it on my head, and I went, what? Yeah. What is this? And we spoke the whole way on the way to Sundance about what VR was. And at the time, I was head of sales for Technicolor. And then when I got to Sundance and did all of my movies and was walked into New Frontier to start meeting people within at the time, the VR world, a very old client of mine and a very old friend of mine cornered me and said, you should get involved in this. You would understand it. You would be able to explain it. You need to get involved. And I was like, I don't even like it. I don't get it. It's not my thing. I don't understand. They're like, no, you just haven't thought about it. Do some research. And so about 3 months later, I did. I woke up at 3:00 in the morning, unbeknownst to me. I have no idea why. And VR was on my mind. I hadn't thought about it since Sundance, and started doing a ton of research on it. Started watching a lot of panels on VR and AR at the time, because AR was just coming. And my son started playing Pokemon. And all of a sudden, I had this epiphany. And that client that whom I loved so much, I texted him at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, and I said, all right, what do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to look at our slate of films for the next 2 years, and I want you to come up with a VR experience for each one. And so thus my, career in VR was born.
Very cool.
New
Sundance.
Frontiers.
Yeah.
Shout out to New Frontiers.
Thank you, Shari.
Yeah.
So kind of would love to learn a little bit, you all know we're in a panel about extended reality. So it's kind of the umbrella. It's funny, I think 4 years ago I was on a panel at CES and it was just it was all just about VR. And then the next year was AR. And then this year I'm on a panel about XR. And so just to kind of, that umbrella of all of it. So we're going to touch a little bit about augmented reality, virtual reality, all things that are not in our physical space right now. So I would love for each of you to define how would you personally define immersive technology? And then we'll kind of jump into afterwards kind of how your companies are really transforming the industry using immersive technology.
So I'll start. I started selling immersive technologies in 2007. And that was really like Avatar. So in my opinion, Avatar was the first immersive, truly immersive experience you could actually be involved with. From there, it evolved with lots of 3D, and then it went to 4K, immersive, HDR, all these buzzwords that essentially it just gets you closer to content, makes you feel more emotional connection with the content. I believe that, immersive is now even the Jungle Book, and I would argue that The Lion King is also immersive media, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. These are all different types of media that ultimately you are immersed in watching, in consuming. And so it doesn't matter whether it's a wearable, it doesn't matter whether you're in a headset, and I'll go into what I really feel like is the number one piece of immersive content right now, and that is Fortnite. In my opinion, Fortnite is what the hope was VR would be the moment we all got those headsets. And why is that? Because you are doing everything in Fortnite right now. You are playing a game, you are doing e-commerce, you are socializing, you are watching another feed, you are making transactions, you have created an avatar or are buying an avatar, and you are immersed in a world, and you're also watching concerts. And so to me, Fortnite really is the hope and joy of what we think VR, even AR could potentially be, mixed reality can be in the future. And what's so great about it is that those kids between the ages of 8 and 13, what are they doing? They're all playing Fortnite. So they understand the language that we are trying to explain to all of you who are not playing Fortnite. Unless you are. Anybody here play Fortnite? Yeah. Do you all have kids? Anybody here who has kids who plays Fortnite? Find a kid and watch a kid play Fortnite. I'm telling you, it's fascinating. And it really does show you what immersive media could do.
I think that immersive media is a pretty vague and broad term. I mean, I have certainly felt immersed in a book. I mean, if anything, reading a book is the most immersive experience, right? You're there, and the fidelity is amazing. But I've always thought of immersive tech as breaking free from the frame. That's just the way I've seen it. So, there's framed media, and then there's immersive media, and that can be everything from a virtual or augmented reality experience to a theater experience, where you're now engaging in a three-dimensional space. So,
and going from there, maybe if you can touch on how is Metastage really transforming the industry of what you guys are currently doing?
So Metastage, as she said, specializes in something called volumetric video or volumetric capture. One of the challenges that immersive media had over the past few years was if you wanted to put a real person or a real performer inside of a three-dimensional experience, or what they call a 6DoF experience. Do you guys know what 6DoF is? Okay, so 6DoF means 6 degrees of freedom. It's a very commonly used term in our industry to describe when a player has agency and can move around the space at will. So giving a player an experience in VR or AR with 6 degrees of freedom means they can move all around the space. So if I can move all around the space, I need a three-dimensional performer in that space. Otherwise, I'm going to walk around a flat, basically like a cardboard asset. But there was a challenge putting real people into these three-dimensional experiences. We were relegated to basically two options: either an animated version of that performer, which would often fall into the Uncanny Valley, which many of you be familiar with. It's when you're watching an animated character where they almost look like a person, but they don't quite look like a person. And the closer they get while missing the mark creates this feeling of repulsion called the Uncanny Valley. So we had a lot of people, people in these immersive experiences that fell into the Uncanny Valley. And then for a long time, volumetric video, which is our specialty, wasn't quite technically ready. So Microsoft is the system that Metastage works with. They've spent the last 8 years building this Microsoft mixed reality capture tech stack. And Metastage has the privilege of being the first company in the United States to bring that technology to the market as a production operation. So we work with clients who are interested in bringing real people, like you, me, Marcie, Natascha, or Beyonce, or Malala, into immersive experiences. And on our stage, we use 106 video cameras, like a globe, encircling that performer from every angle. There's an 8-foot diameter circle that they can move and engage inside. We can do up to 3 people at the same time, so we can do dance sequences or fight sequences or to have 2 people interacting with each other. We then put it through the software, and on the other side of it, what you get is a very lifelike, fully 3D asset of what happened. In some ways, the most authentic representation of that person to date, because if you're doing a picture of that person or a video of that person, I'm just seeing a selection. I'm just seeing an angle. Now we're capturing you from every angle. We're capturing the way you hold your shoulders. We're capturing the micro expressions and nuances of your behavior, and on top of it, we get something that is actually a pretty small file size. That's another magic of the Microsoft system, is that we're able to take that 10 gigabytes of raw data per second and compress it to 10 megabytes per second. And so then you drag and drop, and now I have Malala in an AR experience or in a VR experience. And so that's what we specialize in, is real people for these experiences.
I love the voila part. And all of a sudden, it just works.
It does. It's magic. Magic. 8 years of R&D.
Amazing.
And now there's magic. Yes. Yeah. And it's fun. It's fun because I love that I get to deal with real people. There's always the challenges. No joke. We had an actress who had a mild heart attack at our stage last week. We had to call 911 and bring her to the hospital. Those are the challenges of dealing with real people on your stage. But I also love people, so I love that that's the part of the whole production pipeline that we get to deal with. She's
Very
okay.
Cool. No, I was
God.
going to ask.
Yeah.
Thank you. And if you want to talk a little bit how Technicolor is transforming the industry and what you're doing really to kind of engage consumers further.
Yeah, so Technicolor, 100-year-old entertainment and media company, 100 plus, I think we're 103 now. Has always pretty much been on the forefront of anything that is technical and creative. So, we've had a challenging last 10 years. We were film labs, and the minute film labs went away, what was Technicolor going to do? Quite honestly, that's what we did. We made film. So I was brought in about 8 years ago because I owned and ran a company that was creating a near set daily system so that director of photographies could see and directors could actually see their dailies real time on set. And what happened was, as Technicolor was sunsetting the lab business, they needed to come up with what they were going to transition to. So voila, company got sold. I ended up going there as the head of sales. And at the same time, we started sunsetting other businesses that really just were getting commoditized. We had purchased a company called MPC Film, which you may know by The Jungle Book or The Lion King, responsible for large volume visual effects. So pretty much if you've seen the film, MPC has done the visual effects, or Technicolor has done the color, or has done the editorial on it. So what we do globally is we build pipelines to service the media industry that is making lots and lots and lots and lots of content. And how do you do that? You do that through scale. You do that through erecting teams of creatives in different global areas. Why are you going globally? Because there's a lot of tax benefits if you go to France or if you go to Montreal. So as we were looking at what our future looked like, Technicolor didn't want to just concentrate on the entertainment and media side of the business. They wanted to use immersive as the tip of the spear to move into other verticals. Other verticals like real estate, location-based entertainment, automotive. So using this technology, this 3D type wearable technology content, because by the way, it's not just building apps. You're building large pieces of content that need to be pushed through a pipeline to then be able to be brought to your face. That's not easy. And so the thing is in a traditional visual effects or film or television pipeline, you're working in 2D. Now you're working in 3D. You're working with something called a game engine, which is not a traditional pipeline. And so it was the idea of bringing together what this old world of creation of content and this new world that has been building games now for many, many years and putting them together, thus creating a new pipeline for a sustainable and repeatable way for people to make stories and experiences in a cost-effective manner. So, how did we do that? We built a center of excellence that we called the Technicolor Experience Center, where we brought lots of artists and residents together alongside our traditional 2D pipeline, put them together in the same room, and we honestly said, create some stuff. And it was really around what I felt was important for Technicolor to learn. So if it was data of scanning an environment, I would find a creative who was doing a project that needed to scan the Amazon rainforest. And so I was like, okay, let's scan that environment and let's see how we make that work in a story. And so I was fortunate enough that led a team of about 25 of both artists and residents that we pulled from certain verticals so that we could explore those verticals and see if we could monetize those verticals. And then also technically understand what the pipeline and the workflow look like in order to execute those workflows.
Very cool. So kind of we've talked about the what is it, and what you all do. I would love to kind of, I'm sure we've all seen a lot of the luxury parts of the immersive tech, but would love to dive into the use cases and what industries you're seeing. I know, Christina, I believe you just did something with the Dallas Cowboys.
Yes, actually, we did a big capture with 5 of the Dallas Cowboys. I would just say keep an eye out for some AR Dallas Cowboy stuff coming up in the next few weeks. I'm allowed to talk about it, but it hasn't quite had its big debut yet, so I'm excited about it.
So beyond sports, what other industries have you really seen some good use cases using
volumetric video? So interestingly enough, and it makes sense when you think about it, I would say that almost all of our projects have fallen into what I would call the documentary category. It's people playing themselves. We've had a number, we did have recently do something that was about the future of healthcare, and that did have actors playing parts. But for the most part, it makes sense if you're doing an authentic representation of a person, then we do a lot of public figures or people that people know playing themselves. And I would say that the 3 areas we've seen the most interest in since we opened last August, so we've been open a year and change at this point, have been sports, music, and healthcare. Those have been the biggest sectors. And so it's exciting to think about, especially in the music vertical, to think about capturing some of these iconic performers doing some of their biggest hits in their prime, and knowing that could be a part of a digital archive that lives on for generations. So that's very exciting. Yeah.
Great one. How about yourself? What maybe we've talked a lot. I know beforehand we were talking about upcoming projects that you probably can't talk about yet, but some maybe that can really showcase what Technicolor has done in the space.
Well, I think that it's really about, for me, it was about making lots of content, but it was also learning about how to monetize that content. So it's really great that we all got involved in this really wonderful new world. But what I learned very early on, there was no way to monetize it. There wasn't enough headsets in the world. People weren't making good choices of how they were creating the content or what it was for. It was mainly for marketing. And so that goes away real quick if you don't get the eyeballs. So for me, it was about, how do I make a piece of content that serves multitude of things? So I think, I was fortunate enough, I touched a lot of different pieces of content. But I think the one I'm proudest of is Mars Home Planet, because it had so many different elements of what we needed to solve. And the first one that we needed to solve was, can you create a 3D object in a game engine that looked cinematic? That was a really big problem to solve. Can you take a CAD drawing or some sort of design in a manufacturing industry and go into a game engine and create something from that in a kind of photorealistic world? We were able to check that box. How do you create a sustainable, repeatable distribution platform in a location-based market so that you could actually monetize a piece of content at the same time? We accomplished that. And what was so amazing about it was the delivery of content in a way. So ultimately, HP, Technicolor, and NVIDIA got together and said, look, we want to highlight a game engine workflow. We want you to use our computers to build this experience. And we want to explore what life on Mars would look like if it was inhabited with 1 million people. Okay, well, that's kind of broad. So the beauty of that was, I said, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it. But let's, check off all these boxes, because nobody was monetizing content. Nobody really understood what location-based meant, except for a theme park scenario. And I said, well, let's see if we can do all that. And we did. And so it was essentially thrown out to the ether, to the world. If you are a scientist, if you are an engineer, if you are a student, send us what you think Mars will look like in 2134, I don't even remember the date, inhabited with 1 million people. And we got hundreds, literally thousands of these CAD drawings that we had to create assets from. And so we had to have a community manager, and we had to sift through all this stuff. And we honestly got it a year ago, May, was the last CAD drawing that came in, and we were premiering at SIGGRAPH, which was 4.5 months later. At the very beginning of it, I said, all right, I want to tell a story. Nobody's going to care if they see a bunch of cars, and they're not going to care if they see the rockets. There needs to be some sort of story that goes along with it. Like, I kept asking myself, I was never a Mars fan. Like, I never even knew about Mars. But all of a sudden, I was learning all this stuff about Mars, and I was like, why would anybody want to go to Mars? It's not like it's easy. I mean, it's not like, you're getting into, it's a lot harder to go to, it's harder to go to Mars. It's just not easy. So that's what I wanted to explore. I wanted to explore the reason behind. I also, it's really great when I'm going into a long thing, but ultimately the whole idea behind Mars was monetization of content in an LBE way, using haptics and to tell a story.
Very cool.
Cool. And so we've talked a lot about the use cases, what's worked. Having experienced this myself, there's a lot of barriers to entry and a lot of education that goes along when you're trying to work with organizations and brands to help them understand how do you best use the technology. So I'd love to kind of say, what would you think, and Christina can start, some of the current challenges that you see with clients you're working with or with people considering, and any barriers to entry as well?
Well, the biggest barrier to entry for us so far has been the distribution mechanisms. We have been tied until recently to an app container. So backing up a bit, our volumetric captures, as they're called, can scale across many platforms. You can, if you want afterwards, I'm happy to show you. I have some examples on my phone. I can basically trigger a hologram, if you want to call it that, and it's basically the three-dimensional video asset, and I can summon that hologram and walk all around it as if that person were in this space, and that's called augmented reality, and that's specifically mobile augmented reality. Then there is AR glasses, like the HoloLens or the Magic Leap or whatever Apple might be releasing next year. And that's a whole other blend. That's like the next step up of augmented reality. And then there's obviously virtual reality, where you're in a full sensory deprivation and sensory replacement experience. And our captures can work in any of those. Obviously, because most people want to get the most eyeballs on whatever their project is, mobile augmented reality has been the most sought after product, but even that was a struggle because of the app container. So a couple of our big clients from the fall were people like the New York Times, the Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, people that had apps already, or had, in the case of Royal Caribbean, a captive audience that would be willing to download an app and engage with it on the ship. And a lot of other people, that was just something that was a point of friction. That being said, we actually have just successfully integrated with a company, Eighth Wall, if you know them. Eighth Wall does they do web AR, which means that I can now share one of our captures with a link. You can click that link and now make somebody summon that person in your living room without having the app container. That's a huge watershed moment. That is brand new news. We just shared it last week. So looking forward to finding the first use cases that are interested in using web AR. So that's been a big challenge. And then I would say the other huge challenge is hair. So our technology stack is built on a mesh. There's a couple of ways you could do a volumetric capture. One is a voxel-based approach, and one is more of a mesh-based approach. Microsoft decided to go with a mesh because it would be a smaller file size. And they decided that getting a high fidelity capture at a small file size was the key to make something commercially viable. What we've sacrificed, though, is the super fine detail of anything that's too thin, like hair. It's basically looking for geometry. And if it can't recognize what this is, it will start to glob it to my face or to my shoulders. Mm-hmm. And so as a result, we have to be very strategic about any kind of hairstyles. Long hair needs to be in a braid or a bun, or if we're putting it back, it has to be kind of in a geometric shape. And that just kind of stinks. You know what I mean? It's like when you're working with a celebrity and you have to tell somebody like, Beyonce that we need to, rein in those magnificent curls. So in what we do when we're working with high profile talent is we go through their looks, we find looks they've already worn, and then we say, this will be volumetrically friendly. And that is my personal biggest frustration with volumetric technology.
I feel your pain. We have the same issue in capturing as well.
Yes.
And not wearing dark colors.
Yes.
And
yes.
most people like to wear black.
And we can actually do black and white. It's not ideal. Yeah. It's not the best. We can do black and white. We can't do green because we have a green space.
Yeah, we were capturing a yoga instructor once, and she was wearing basically an outfit, a sports bra and pants that were the same color of her skin. And we saw it on the camera, and we're like, wow, she basically looks nude. This will not work on a hologram.
That'll sell a lot.
Yeah.
Sell a lot,
Naked
probably
yoga.
not good for the brand. So I know before we jump into audience questions and my final question, I don't know if you wanted to touch on a couple of challenges that you...
Making money at it. I mean, honestly, it's very challenging. Although... we were at OC6, which was Oculus's conference a week and a half ago, was it? And, Mark Zuckerberg got up and said, $100 million. That's how much money we've been monetizing in our app for Quest, the new headset that is standalone. That is very exciting. I mean, that means that there is a market out there. I think it's education. It's really educating people that as a company owner or as a person who wants to innovate in your world, you should really start innovating on this. And the reason why I say that is if you just take a look at the internet and how long it took for the internet to scale. And in fact, I'll even take you back further. Let's look at the TV. The TV, black and white to color scaled, it took 15 to 20 years for every home to have a TV. So I think that it's coming, and a lot of people are weary when, I've gotten a lot of people in headsets, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether it's a glass, it doesn't matter if it's a VR headset that's clunky. The reality is it's coming, and these companies that would not be spending billions of dollars on building this hardware. And I feel like if you bury your head in the sand and you don't get in front of it, then you're not innovating. And it's a very small window to walk into right now, and it's still brand new. So, there's no experts out there. And I feel like that everybody should look at a way in their business to see how they can start transitioning it. Because at least then there's a reason why, Natascha's company is doing a 3D asset library. There's a reason why you're building an asset library. It's going to be used. It will be used. It'll be used in ads. It'll be used in the web. It'll be used interactively on your phones. It'll be used on your face.
Well, and I think I think one of the reasons that people are like, there's a big difference seeing somebody in a headset and then being in the headset yourself. If you look at somebody in the headset, they look ridiculous, and it causes that knee-jerk reaction of tech has gone too far. There's something on their face now. This isn't cool. But then, so to compare the knee-jerk reaction of seeing somebody else with that on their face to the experience of being inside some of these transcendent, amazing VR experiences and that are increasingly social. Where now Marcie can be in New York, I'm in LA. We're now in an absolutely mind-blowing adventure together in VR. I have a friend in Connecticut who was like getting really nervous about the winter months, and I was like, Kira, get a Quest. We'll hang out. We'll play games. We'll make art. So I have seen, I think, the best of what VR, and we're talking specifically VR, I've seen the best of what VR has to offer, and that's how I know it is going to be popular, because it's too cool not to be. However, most people don't see the inside, they just see the photo from the outside, and they think that could never be, or will never be.
Yeah, my first VR.
I was told to take off my headset when I was on a plane.
Really?
Yeah, they told me.
See, that's called education.
I mean, honestly, it's uncomfortable. These seats.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a lack of education.
That's interesting. Which headset was it? The Go? The Quest. Yeah.
Good for you. You got
the Quest is pretty big to
Nice.
wear on a plane. That's bold, but I, yeah.
It was a long flight, and it's
Yeah.
No, you should tell. I bring
That's
my
interesting.
Quest.
Which airline?
Oh,
Southwest.
you know what? I'm going to tweet that.
We should tweet them.
I'm going to tweet that. Hey,
tweet them.
Southwest, what are you doing?
I love that
Like,
they
honestly,
take off
you-
the
it's-
headset where I was on a plane recently, and the guy took 2 conference calls. And I was like, for real? But anyway, so I know we just have a few minutes. I want to open up to questions. One really quick thing in one word, kind of, I like just to kind of like, if you had any piece of advice, a short little snippet to the audience, if they're thinking or considering using AR, VR, XR, I'll start with mine, is just make sure you have a goal when you're considering using the technology, whether it's social media, generated content, if it's lead generation, just make sure you have that goal before you go and invest a lot of money, because I can tell you right now, you will fail if you don't have a goal. And so that's kind of always my piece of advice. So if you can just give your snippet, and then I'll open it up to the audience.
Yeah, I would just say really understand what you're trying to do. I mean, a goal is nice. And if you really want to monetize off of it, monetization is a very big deal. And you will feel like you failed, which is not a bad thing. You'll learn a lot. But you will feel like you failed if you did not get your ROI back. So you need to understand that you probably won't get your ROI back yet, but it's nice to have a library asset.
This breaks my heart a little as a hardcore VR nerd, which I am, but I would say start it with AR. Again, I would say start with some kind of, and I'll say why. One, if you start with the conception around an AR experience, you can build something that people can engage with right now on a phone that will scale to whatever Apple is planning on releasing next year. So that's fun, right? To be ahead of the game on a brand new Apple computing platform. So, I would say build it in Unity or build it in one of these game engines that will definitely have updates for whatever comes next. The other thing that's easier about AR is you don't have to do the entire world building. You're building an asset and then placing it into the already existing physical environment. That's a great way to dip your toe into the immersive sector. If you want to go all in, I do think it's never been a better time to be developing for VR because of the Quest. And I would look specifically at some of the requirements and rules that they have around developing concept, creative for the Quest. But I think that Christmas is a lot of people are going to get them, and people like me who have them want to do cool stuff on it, are willing to pay $5 or $10 or $20 to do stuff.
$29.99.
Yeah, whatever it is. So
No,
yeah.
cool. Well, I know there's a question in the back.
So just as a comment, I think a really sort of first use case for really anyone is a training environment. Because there's lots of environments, I mean, even if you think about just like harassment prevention, training for your HR staff,
I'm working on one of those right now.
training, I think that gets to what training is and its education. And I think VR can be massive in education.
Definitely.
All kinds of simulations, all kinds of, and so one of the things I challenge you guys to think about is like how are people going to be able to preserve intellectual property in these environments, effectively, artistically, or what have you, or even controlling and owning their own likeness in these environments. So I think there's a lot of sort of digital ethics and
Totally.
but opportunity, but also things to think about because, when it comes down to the training, right now you've got the big textbooks and they are, sort of the suppliers of these things, but they're going to be immersive. I already know that there's SDSU is doing a lot of nurses training, and, simulations and things like that, and they're like, it's actually a lot cheaper to do it in VR than the $50,000 dummy that they have to buy to have them do the CPR on.
And the success rates are high because of the fact that you have their full and complete attention while they're in it, and it's interactive. Yeah, so training and education is huge.
Yeah, I think that also education is something that I challenge anybody here who's an educator to truly look at VR as a way to educate kids with ADHD. I have 3 kids with ADHD, and I can tell you I spend thousands of dollars on everything I can, from tutors to therapists to everything you can potentially imagine. And I'm proud to say that, finally my kid is at grade level in 8th grade. And my point is if he had a VR headset and he could spatially walk around and experience it in a different way, I think he and she would probably have a better learning experience than they have right now.
Nice. We have a question right here.
Yeah, so my question is around obstacles. So I've been either directly or indirectly involved in your space for the last 10 years. I'm the biggest supporter and fan, but I'm going to ask a contrarian question. So I want to know, because I heard a lot of the same things 10 years ago when I was helping companies get funded in that space, in your space. And to see the trajectory be not quite where everyone wants it right now is I have my ideas on it, but I want to hear from you. What do you think are the greatest obstacles? Is it to more development in your space? Is it content? Is it infrastructure?
Well, I think that when you're building an entirely new computing platform that's completely immersive, the technological hurdles that it takes to solve the many, many challenges are vast and take time. And I think that was maybe the biggest thing, is that everyone thought that it could happen faster than it is. It's just taking as long to solve these problems as it is. And the Quest was the headset for me that when in 2014 and I put on that DK1, that was the one I was imagining. It took 5 years to get there. I think this wouldn't even exist without Facebook. Like, Facebook has single-handedly created this industry and is the one keeping it, propelling it forward. So there's that. 2, and this is a hard one to really figure out why, but the content ecosystem was never supported with the same kind of financial backing as the tech stuff, and that's just so classic. But it's, of course, what are you going to watch? Or what are you going to do on the thing? You need to put money into the content ecosystem, but very few want to take that risk. And so that was also just an annoying reality of the world.
And I would say way I did is I wanted to start in large footfall areas because it became about socialization of VR and what does that look like. So I knew that if I could get a certain percentage of people in a headset, I could monetize that and start showing that you would have an ROI. So I focused mainly on the museum markets because I thought, oh my gosh, did you know that there are 54 billion people that actually walk through a museum every day and they need reasons to reinvent their spaces, and oh my gosh, if they do it in immersive media. So I started building my thesis around that. And honestly, what happened was Technicolor got bored with it. I think people want shit to happen fast. And the reality is it's not going to happen fast. You're building an entire ecosystem of
And there are so
content.
many challenges. I mean, I was just
Exactly.
even
It's
thinking about the
it's-
museum thing, and like the fact that you have to clean the headset every time
Yeah.
somebody comes out. Like there are just tons of
There's-
challenges.
but it's
But-
feedback,
Yeah.
and you learn.
Yes.
And that's the thing.
Yeah, and it doesn't change the fact that it's still really cool. And really cool stuff does, over time, eventually grow.
And
but,
one thing
yeah.
Marcie and I were talking about before this, what I think is a big problem is my question, like, do you think a lot of companies, AR, VR, have recently shut down? They raised millions of dollars, and I always say, like, that's not good for our industry, but
I think it's awesome. I think it's freaking great because everybody thinks they
point I
can
was
just
getting
walk
to
in.
where, yes,
They're
but,
like, hey, I can develop an app that's going to deliver, intense VR, and you're going to walk around. It's only going to cost
But
$500
I was
grand.
getting to our talk about, did we give a lot of these companies enough time, or did they scale too quickly? And it was a combination. I think, like it's going to hit 25 million, and I think it's that conversation of a lot of the companies. Like we've been scrappy for 7 years, right? And we found a way. We're like the only other company that found a way to monetize the Connect besides Microsoft, right? For a very long time, and that's how we survived through events and scrappiness of 7, a team of 7.
Yeah.
And you did
like-
production services.
And we did production
Yeah.
services, which is not easy.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important question to ask that I think we should start asking is like, did we give a lot of these companies enough time? And Marcie has some very good points on this. So I know we are over time, but I don't know if you guys are around for a little bit if other people
Yeah.
have questions after. But want to thank our panelists, want to thank UCLA for having us, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.